I think everyone knows who I am, John Ney, founder and CEO of Norm AI. Thank you so much for coming to the inaugural annual Central Park AI Forum. And Henry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Henry Moniz. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer of Meta. I was in New York for about 18 years working, and I've done 5 years out in Silicon Valley. Also 2 tours of duty in Washington. So it's good to be back and to be in a room which seems to be a gathering of people from those 3 hubs, which seem more important than ever in the world today. To have those three people from those 3 areas sort of collaborating.
And we're going to set the tempo of rapid fire here. So we want to have the first 20 minutes show all the other panelists how quickly they need to move to, because we had the blessing of having too many great speakers today, and so unfortunately I packed it a little too much. So we're going to stay exactly on these things here. So just to give you context about why we're going to be kind of going back and forth so aggressively with each other.
Sounds good.
So starting with this idea of legal sludge. So Cass Sunstein, a professor at Harvard, has this book around legal sludge. And the idea is that there's billions of hours a year spent by people filling out forms for the government. And then we've kind of adapted that idea at Norm to regulatory sludge as well. So checking things, ticking and tying, filling out forms, doing a lot of the manual compliance and legal work. It's just a lot of what we call sludge. And so, Henry, from your perspective, where do you see that kind of practically, both at Meta and then also previously and more generally?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's involved with a global company knows that every jurisdiction has their own laws and requirements. And I mean, anybody who's bought a product, right? You deal with terms of service that are like 20 pages long that absolutely no one reads until they need to. So, yeah, it's kind of everywhere. I would say that there are times when we try to look at principles, right? Because the people developing these terms of services and regulations, they all have the same intent. It's just that they kind of like word it differently. And so you spend a lot of time trying to find principles, right? Like the speed limit. Obviously, we don't want everyone to memorize the speed limit in every jurisdiction, but if you're driving in a crowded area with your school children, you don't have to look. You know you should be driving slowly. If you're driving across the desert or in the Autobahn in Europe, even if you spin off, you're not going to hurt anybody except maybe yourself. So it's really, we're focused on principles as a razor, but that's not enough because obviously the proliferation of laws is just incredible these days.
Yeah, and on the notion of principles and standards, that's something that we think a lot about around how do you encode law into code. And it's a lot easier if it's very specific if-then statements, but even on a speed limit, for example. I mean, that's something where, if you go more than 60, then you can't do that. That's already not the way it works, right? So thinking about the messy reality of how do you encode even something as simple as that, you then very quickly realize that you need a standards-based analysis. And so in terms of large language models and how they apply, we've been thinking a lot about that, and I know you're thinking about that as well.
Yeah, and look, we use a lot of them, right? We have a team of engineers at my company, and they build a lot of great things. But I would say in the law, and there's a lot of controls, compliance controls. There's even auditing. We even have some second level auditing. But there are places, obviously, where AI still struggles, right? Particularly around places where you need judgment or like use a human conscience or fiduciary duties and materiality. So while I think we're off to a good start, I don't think that the higher level thinking that is involved in the law is going to be replaced anytime soon.
Yeah, and we've been working on our side the notion of legal engineering around how far can you get that, and then where do you have to have a human sit on top of that and supervise that, and where are the boundaries between what AI can do and what does require human expertise. And so a lot of the work we've been doing around legal engineering is how do you encode the structure of specific rules and regulations in code using symbolic systems, but then how do you call on large language models to hit on exactly what you're talking about around the more principle-based, standards-based parts. And fiduciary duties is an interesting example because that one is, I'd say, beyond the scope of what's possible with large language models, given how much context is required and how much everything above and beyond what you could possibly put into an automated system right now. But around things like materiality, if you scope that in a specific enough way and you put enough context around it about the situation, then we're finding that's an area where you can make that type of determination. So curious from your perspective about the different types of standards and principles and where you think it's most amenable to a computational approach.
Look, I think it's music to the ears of people who are lawyers who are old like I am, because it means that you're gonna you're still for a while gonna have to sit on top of these things and make judgments. I don't know what it means for all the younger or newer or less experienced lawyers who are likely to have a lot of their work replaced by machines. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see, and it hasn't happened at scale yet. I think what will happen eventually is, right now I think a lot of in-house companies are using the tools and have chatbots. We build them. We have engineers to do a lot of things, a lot of the basic work, and even some of the auditing. But it remains to be seen how quickly they'll adopt. It involves a lot of cultural change, and I think right now people, we build them, but sometimes people buy these tools and they use them kind of almost anecdotally. They'll play with them and they'll have
like a co-pilot.
Yeah. Good. Like I need 80. The privacy law analyzed in 80 jurisdictions, and it'll be rendered in a minute or a matter of minutes versus an armada of young lawyers working over the weekend doing analysis from a law firm. But that it's culturally, like what you'd really have to do, I think, if you're not us but a different place, is you'd probably have to be AI first. You'd have to figure out what AI can do, and then put the lawyers in around that. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's just lawyers using chatbots and playing with it and say, "Oh, this is interesting. Look, it helped me write a speech in 5 minutes." So, that change management is going to be a huge issue, I think.
Yeah, so retrofitting existing large institutions where it's human driven, and then it's frankly marginal, like 10% improvement of using a more co-pilot based AI to help the humans, but it's still that human driven one. And then you're saying think about it from the perspective of starting with just AI and saying where the boundaries of what AI can do, the sort of jagged capabilities that are evolving every month or so, GPT-5, 6, et cetera. Where do those lie, and then wrap the humans in and around that as the complement to that? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. And look, and that's different for like I said, different size companies. It's different for in-house counsel versus law firms. There's a lot there.
And on those differences, so if it's in-house teams, legal and compliance teams, if it's outside counsel, and then the distinction between compliance and legal. So I just threw a lot at you with two different dimensions there, but how are your thoughts on what we just talked about? AI first, AI driving the legal and compliance work, in that distinction between outside work, whether it's outside counsel or compliance consulting firms, and in-house. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think on the first, the distinction between outside and inside is kind of the way it has been for a while, right? It's like Isaiah Berlin, this Oxford Don, wrote about the fox versus the hedgehog, right? Mm-hmm. Like a fox knows many things and flits around, and a hedgehog burrows down deep and is a deep SME, subject matter expert. So outside counsel still functions as that subject matter expert, right, when you need them. In-house counsel is more like about spotting issues and et cetera. And I think AI can be used for both of them, really. As to compliance versus law, I mean, I think there've been a lot of fault lines, but what's really emerging now, I think, is that law is really just still about identifying, for instance, in a product context, what do we have to do? And then compliance is about doing it, right? It's about building the controls around that, which AI can help with now. And then also providing assurance that the controls are working as intended and whether they can be refined. And frankly, we're using AI for both. So that distinction, those distinctions don't seem to matter. And if you look at how things would be disintermediated and disrupted in the future, basically you would have, at some point, AI basically doing everything, and you'd have somebody really experienced and smart, over the top, I guess, for those discretionary things. But it's hard for, I think, to disrupt like legal elites who go through all this training, which, by the way, is extensively long. You have a 3-year JD program just so you can have a doctorate. It's really like you could do it. It could be a master's. You could do it in 2 years. You could do it 1 year and do an apprenticeship the way they do in common law countries. But it would require a lot of change. But I think it will happen eventually because it's just vastly more efficient. The billable hour is the thing that, think about that. That encourages, why do it in an hour when I can do it in 2? It's absurd.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the interesting part of this distinction related to the outside and inside, where inside you totally have the incentive to do it as efficient while still effective as possible. And then if you're billing by the hour outside, you don't have that incentive, right? So blurring the lines between what is done outside a company, what is done in, I think it's actually a good opportunity to blur the lines of how do you take something that's done outside, and then how over time do you have the experts who do it outside, the hedgehogs that go super deep, like you're saying, right? And then how do they help to train a system, both in general and then also for a specific firm, to then start to bring it more in-house. So then you have the more generalist, the not the hedgehog, but the other one that can kind of see across things, know the context of the company, but then take that AI agent-based system and bring it in-house. So that's something we're thinking a lot about, is that blurring the lines between what's done out, what's done in, and then also, like you're saying, between legal and compliance. And to your point on how AI can facilitate the blurring of those things in a positive way, I think one of the things you and I have talked about is around how you can segregate out, well, what does this need to be seen if you don't want to implicate, if this is like some litigation that eventually happens and you don't want people to see that, right? So, but with the ability to segregate data and then show that to certain AIs and not the other AIs, it could potentially facilitate having something be more kind of consolidated across legal and compliance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
good.
So, this all sounds great. It sounds a little futuristic. Are you and people working on these types of tools? And part of the reason I ask is because there's a lot I'm looking at it from a commercial perspective, right? There's the rev share. This AI is going to save time, and right now it's already happening. Right? Law firms use AI to do research and all sorts of things, but it's not always transparent around who's, whether those savings, they're reaping the benefits of them, or they're being passed on to the client.
Right.
It's a little bit shrouded in a little hazy right now. So.
Totally. So at a high level, there's automation gains to be had, right? There's the ability to take a lot of what an initial kind of associates in the law firm context and then other entry-level people in compliance context, and then frankly automate a lot of that. That's there, that possibility. But to your point, it's like, where do you share those gains? So like that activity can occur, and then how do you incentivize things for it to occur in a way that that actually passes on the savings to the end client? And so that's something we're thinking a lot through right now, and it's why we work directly with companies and not with law firms, because we think the structural model of a law firm where you have hours billed by human hours, billing by that, and then now all of a sudden we have a magic thing that can automate hours of human labor, like it's totally misaligned and just it's structurally flawed. So that's why we don't sell directly to law firms, and that's how at least we're thinking about it in terms of how to really just partner with the client themselves and be on the journey with them of how can we pass on a lot of the savings to you, but then of course share some with ourselves as well in automation.
Yeah, that's a lot of cultural change, a lot of change management.
Yeah, to your point earlier, it's like a big part of this isn't necessarily the technology, it's the change management, especially in large organizations like yours and others. So how have you guys dealt with that? Like, how do you think about the change management of the retraining of people and of moving forward in this?
Yeah, look, I think it's early innings, obviously, but I would I don't want to really speak for my company, but you can imagine that in Silicon Valley, that leaders of companies are really pushing people to put AI first and to lead with that. So I think it's happening. It's just that I don't know what the tipping point will be.
So there's maybe a dissonance between a super intelligence team and on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there's different types of, part of it is, I think the hard part is that if you think about the way people are incentivized to build things, right? You can imagine a world where eng teams will build a product that helps solve a problem, and it works really, really well initially for that first set of use cases. But as things evolve, right, people have landed their project, they're getting credit for their performance in that period. And then, if you're an engineer, you might be on to the next sexy thing you want to build. You might not necessarily be pushing, updates and improving.
It's not as fun to maintain as it is to build.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun to maintain and build. And so I think if we could solve for that, I think we'd see a lot more sustainable building development internally, and these tools would be like, the way apps run, other apps run that are commercially available. It's just that it's not the same, it just doesn't have the same focus. And again, I'm not speaking for Meta, I'm speaking for my experience talking to everybody in Silicon Valley around technology companies and how they operate.
And so you mean like the building of tools for what are traditionally considered cost centers like legal and compliance, the building of that is something that it's maybe sexy to build, but then to actually maintain that in-house and do all that work in-house, it's not the right setup for that. That's your point?
Yeah, I think it'll evolve, but part of it is if you obviously there's a cost benefit, right? Like if you have engineers, we have a lot of engineers. All these companies have a lot of engineers, but do you want them working on products that are accretive and commercial and that can really build the bottom line? Mm-hmm. In some ways, legal's like, these assurance functions are kind of like the stepchildren. So you don't want your best engineers really focused on that. So there's a little bit of that, to be candid.
Yeah.
Which is not to say, look, the engineers that we do have working on things they're fantastic. But it's still a blend of external tools and internal tools, mm-hmm. And it will be for a while. But I think everybody would love to have that solution, right? That place where you go to, I don't know, maybe it's a law firm that really is adroit around technology, and they can be transparent about this is our model, we're agile, we use these tools, we're going to save on this, you're going to pay more. Our top lawyers who have exercised the discretion, their hourly rates are going to look really huge and gaudy to you, but in the end, the final analysis, it'll be more efficient and more effective, because there's no question that AI is, even in the context of just basically, it's really efficient and it is really effective, right? You can look. The law is a strange thing, right? It's backward looking, right? It's based on precedent. It's really strange if you think about that. But you go back and you look at these precedents and try to determine what they mean for the future. But AI could look at things like, let's look at the judge who's presiding over this case and who's going to be making decisions. Let's look at where she went to school. Obviously, Richard Parsner, University of Chicago. There's an economic. You can see threads and things like that. But you could have AI. You could have AI interrogate tons and tons of precedent and look at all sorts of tendencies and get a pretty sharp idea of what the bent is of any any potential jurist, and it could be pretty effective, I think, at determining what outcomes might be.
Yeah. No. In our last 42 seconds here, we're going through all the frontier of AI law and compliance in 20 minutes. So the last thing I want to chat about very briefly is the idea of AI. 5 years from now, GPT-10, there's AI agents. How are you thinking about that world? Because you guys are already governing AI agents internally for certain meta rules. So now extrapolate that to 5 years from now, AI agents and the governance of those in the last 20 seconds.
The answer is I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting, but at the same time, I'll leave you with this provocative. It's a little scary, right? The idea that AI is auditing AI, which is auditing AI. Like, where's the human oversight, and where does it exist? And are humans intelligent enough to understand that what they're overseeing relative to AI? So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, one day we'll get to, I don't know if anyone's seen that movie recently, Minority Report. My kids were watching it, and I just kind of walked by, and I'm thinking, wow, you can predict someone's going to do something wrong based on, taking the past as prologue. Like, I don't know. Could that be a thing? It sounded insane when that movie came out. Nowadays, who knows? There's determinism in the world, so we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's a scary world, but it's exciting, and that's one of the things we'll work on is the governance of AI agents and trying to think through that. So. Yeah,
well, I'm happy. I'm really excited to be here and to hear what other speakers have to say, because as you can see, I'm on a steep learning curve, even though I work in a technology company. So
well, we all are. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.